conservation of energy, the principle which dictates that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but only ever be converted from one form into another. This also holds that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, and all clouds have a silver lining. As the balance is maintained in our universe, this may be propagated by symmetrical analogs developed in space, converting asymmetry into a relative energy construct. This theory could also apply to everything, where nothing can ever be created or destroyed, allowing life to emerge as one of the many symmetries carried by nature, as an interface into the conscious, if you like. By this theory, death would define life the same way the event horizon divides and defines the black hole. So, in the same way we have different planes of space-time within our universe, as a part of our universe, so life would have its own facets and openings. Unfortunately, like a black hole, they are totally removed from us, and you may have to die to prove they exist. Or, not. Potentially uncontactable, the modern approach has emerged which would actually allow some contact with a dead source. Thomas Edison, the inventor of the phonograph, the record player, no less, was the first to attempt to cross this divide. He didn't get very far, but continued his work even after his death, his progress being communicated through a medium. In 1967, this is known as necrophonia, or necromancy, establishing tentative contact with the late deceased, or the living impaired, as the living deceased, through exceptionally sensitive and high-energy communication systems. No proof of its validity has yet been shown, and you may find that you end up communicating with an inner space civilization, instead establishing one-way contact with beings ahead of us, bearing in mind that it would be one-way and you probably wouldn't understand them. Anyway, the modern spin on the conservation of energy involves the more recent unity of place, unified through spin, or internal angular momentum, which, hypothetically, and informationally, casts you at the center of creation. As is a butterfly, as is a horse, as is a giraffe, as is an ant, which are really just other hypnotized parts of you, in different states of awareness, as we live, both through ourselves, and through the subconscious of each other, as the body simply maintains the dialectically opposed metaphysical holographic image of its abstractions in space. And the universe is formed, in parallel, through tunneling. By this theory, at least in some sense, the universe exists within you as part of its internal mechanism. So, in a sense, where the conservation of energy relates to the universe as a whole, the unity of place relates, specifically, to the very space and time that you do occupy, where, by consideration of internal angular momentum, brackets, which is subtly different to the angular momentum which we are used to, as a kind of emotional black point in space. As much is carried in front of you, as there is carried behind you, and the universe exists, in all places at once. Thus, to reach a distant location of space rather like Wonder Woman spinning on her axis, into herself, merely requires you spinning into it, or readjusting to meet it, as you merely move up and into that, which was already a part of you, brackets, admittedly, a distant one. So, in a sense, everything in creation is its own unique center, carrying two unique and different definitions of itself. The way it sees itself, without boundary, unwound, and infinite, and the way others will see it, with boundary, wound up, and finite. And so, with everything reading everything else into its twisted state, everything is, literally, a part of everything else, in its untwisted one. Thus, reality is formed in the shadows of that which is unique, on a background of that which is not, and it exists, more like a fragmented dream, than anything else. To picture this, we need an example. Any particles in nature, which, including the scalar forces, includes all physical reality, either have the characteristic of spin, or speed. This is because all internal spaces have intrinsic angular momentum associated with them, including ours. This allows a particle, for instance, to be coherent with space in a number of different ways, as it can be locally defined, through its surface, with spin, or, in some sense, rolled around space, in all directions, over its surface, without. This allows it to be coherent, not only in space, but with space, as well. So when it is not locally transcribed, it is globally transcribed, overall, as the information contained within it applies it to the fabric, as a whole, as it becomes an interference pattern of its abstractions in space, existing, in parallel, as a light event in space-time. To sum it up, the particle carries both itself, and its abstractions in space with it, as a borrowed piece, or informational photograph, of its infinite potential. In some sense, it borrows from the global medium, as a whole, to define itself locally. So it too, has an informational donut pulled over the top of itself. So, through a kind of echolocation in space-time, the parts, which make up your body, exist in multiple entanglements with nature. This may be likened to pulling the mathematical donut over the top of yourself. That donut, being the rest of creation. As the body simply maintains a dialectically opposed metaphysical holographic image of its abstractions in space, as a closed metaphysical analog, of an open metaphysical paradigm, and is formed, through tunneling, interfacing higher dimensions, etc. Thus, the universe is not the only thing which is inside out in space. So where the fabric of space is allied through the mechanics of coefficiencies, it is not the atoms doing the talking, it is the coefficiencies working through the atoms doing the talking. As such, life can be seen as a mathematical parody of the rest of creation, interfaced through the mechanics of coefficiencies, where life simply maintains an interface into the coefficiencies of nature. So, abstractly, we are the center of creation, as the plated connections, or the emotional logical component, between the pieces, and its esoteric heart. As such, we are the spirits in the material world, as a kind of thermal equilibrium, or absorption of the spirit within. As for the coefficiencies, the reciprocal, parallel or complementary relationships contained within a housed object, or system, its inner voice, or reason, cohesion, reason, wisdom, esprit de corps, its mind's eye, and inner friction, synergy, symbiosis, the spirit, or the ghost in the machine. This is almost identical to pulling the mathematical donut over the top of yourself.